Hey everybody, welcome back to the Meaning Forge. This is your host, Jim Benton, and well, I have a special guest with me today. Her name is Dr. Vicki. She is a health equity scholar who has published over 42 articles concerning different topics in her field. She is currently a consultant and faculty at Michigan State University, and she champions diversity and inclusion to ensure people are treated the right way. So remember, if you like this content, make sure you like, comment, subscribe, share with your family, your friends, and anyone else who's trying to find meaning. We're trying to build a community here. That way people can come to the library to find anything relevant to whatever it is that they're pursuing. So without any further ado, let's get into it. Hey, how's it going?
Going pretty good. How are you?
I'm doing great. I can't say how privileged I am to have you on the show. Thank you so much for volunteering to come on. So thank you.
Thank you for having me.
No, trust me. So let's kind of start getting into this and really like who is Dr. Vicki? Where does she come from? What's her story so far? What's these meaningful points in your life that have, well, caused you to be who you are today?
Well, I am officially from Durham, North Carolina. So I'm from the Triangle and lived here for the first half of my life. And then I decided it was time to move on somewhere else. My family has never been afraid to travel, never been afraid to hop up and go try new things. And I took that to mean let's do it as we become adults. So in 2005, I left Durham, or I left Chapel Hill. I went to UNC Chapel Hill undergrad, and I went to Michigan. And I've been going to school or working in Michigan since then, up until now. And in that time, I got married and met my husband in high school, and we still, made it all this way through. I have 4 kids, including, this does include my older niece, who we have had the chance to love on since she was tiny. And we have a lovely puppy. Her name is Willow. She is one of the highlights, given that 2020 was nothing less than a bear. So we got her in January 2020, and she's been riding out the pandemic with us. And when you ask who I am a champion for people just being treated the right way. By, in terms of school and all of that, I'm a quantitative kind of person. I went to school for biostatistics and then epidemiology. But in the world of making an impact, numbers do one thing, but to put numbers with useful information is a whole other story. And that's really where I find myself living now. I care about having an impact. I care about people being treated well. And I make sure that that's true for the people who I love in my house. So, the people I live with every day. And we've really learned how to do that pretty well over this last year. When it comes to my family and my friends, I want to make sure that I treat them well, because if you can't count on family to treat you well, then I feel like it puts you at a big disadvantage, and I don't see the need in that. And then I think it's super important when we look into the community space, when we look to our workplace, nobody wants to be treated poorly. Everybody would really like to have a decent time most days. So I figure I can do what I can to support that. Outside of work, I'm sure we'll talk about that more, but outside of work and the vocational kind of lifestyle, we love to travel. That's what my family has been doing in some way, shape, or form. We drove many, many, many times from Michigan to North Carolina, even if it was for a weekend or maybe it was for a month. We would quickly get in the car, and this is my children included. My youngest is 9, and we've made that drive. It's a 12-hour drive. We made it a bunch of times, but hopefully from that you get travel is important to us. Seeing things through other people's eyes is important to us, and getting out to see the world as it is super high up on my list of things to do. That's me.
Okay. So there's a few things I think I want to dial in on a little bit. So I'm also a huge fan of traveling, so that's pretty cool. What's been, I guess, the most eventful traveling excursion you had?
Last year was my most eventful. So we went to Australia last January. Yes, it was. We thought we were going for an extended stay. My husband had a position there, and he moved before us, and we thought we were going to go, and he was going to be there for a couple years, and we were going to figure out how to make it work. And then COVID. And then they were saying in Australia, they were talking about shutting the borders for 18 months. So we wouldn't be able to get back in the US, is how it was sounding, which meant we had to come home. And eventful is an understatement, because we went from thinking, oh, we'll be settling in a new place, to, oh, you got a place to live there and you got a car there. You should probably figure out who you can give them to so you can get home in time. So it was that was unexpected. It was, I can tell you, my children are not afraid of new or difficult situations. And yeah, it really did it stunk that we couldn't really embrace that lifestyle, because they do live in a different, we were in a rural space, so a more rural space. It was a smaller metro area. So the speed of life kind of slowed down a bit, but I'm pretty sure that's as eventful as it can get.
Interesting. So it's funny because one of my favorite shows, or not really shows, but it's a YouTube channel called 24/7 4-wheel drive action or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I know that sounds really bad, but like that's all. Like they were shut down for the same time, and like, they're outdoors doing off-road adventures and stuff. And of course they couldn't do it, and then the fires hit as well. I mean, Australia hit pretty like hard in a lot of ways.
Yep. Matter of fact, we were supposed to go at the beginning of January, and the fires were so bad that I called the airlines to say, wait, can we push our flight back? I just need to know we're not flying into, so we had to fly into Sydney. And I was like, I need to know that it's kind of safe to fly in at this point, because they were still raging. It was scary. And there was a drought at the same time.
That's also Australia. I mean,
Very
the
much.
entire center of the country is a desert.
Yes.
No, that's an oversimplification. Just it's not entirely accurate, but funny, just poking fun. Anyway, so you had a great unexpected, I mean, maybe not great, but an unexpected adventure that happened there. So we're gonna probably dive into that a little later. Kind of pull out some of what you've learned from that, and then, well, here's the next big thing, and we have a very interesting relationship now, because I graduated from East Carolina, and I'm already an ABC fan. So, and for everyone, ABC fan is anybody but Carolina. I mean, anybody but Carolina.
You don't know what you're talking. You don't know what you're missing. You just don't know what you're missing.
It's okay. I had a lot of friends go there. I wanted to go to NC State, and that didn't happen, so I went to East Carolina. Although I was about to go to University of Alabama, but there's some things that happened, so I didn't go there. But anyway, so Tar Heel fan. What's your favorite sport there?
Basketball.
Okay, well, yeah, we are a basketball state. I don't know what I said that for.
I don't know either.
I mean, we are a basketball state. Sorry, North Carolina is not known for football. Like, we're known for basketball. That's that's really what we do.
That's it.
Oddly enough. And I guess I would would like to dial in on maybe some of your experiences in Michigan that you found as a significant event.
There were a few things that happened while I was in Michigan that kind of set up, I think, where I was headed, where I have headed, where I've landed, even up till now. And I'll say the very first one is that I went to graduate school on a full scholarship. So when I went to Michigan, I went thinking, you know what, this will be a neat opportunity to try out teaching. This will be a neat opportunity to learn how to work in community spaces. It'll be a neat opportunity to take numbers and actually help people. But when I got to Michigan, it was a very intense first few months, because I'm trying to figure out how to fit in a program, a graduate program that first of all, many women don't go into. And so I was in biostatistics. Many women don't do that. And then many people of color don't do that either. And it was trying to fit in a space where I didn't see people who looked like me, and I didn't have a lot in common with the people who were there already. So it was a bit of a shocker to walk into that space and feel so isolated. But University of Michigan is a huge place. So of course I found plenty of people to do things with. So one of the places that I got to hang out with a lot of cool people was playing flag football. That was like instantly one of my fun things to do. And there were some really awesome student groups, and that kind of made me feel like I was entering into my own adult space. And I'm telling you that I'm starting with that because I typically don't do things the way that other people tell me to do them or think. That was no exception. And that wasn't the first time. In high school, I was the same kind of kid. But when I got to Michigan, it was deliberately deciding that I could be different. It was okay to be different. I could be in multiple spaces and show different parts of my personality, and everything was going to be fine. Mm-hmm. So the second place this showed up is I had a professor. I was moving on into the PhD in biostat, and I had a professor who effectively told me, nope, you're not going to make it. I don't see people with your kind of skill set make it in this space. And as one of few women, it was like maybe 3 women in the whole department and the rest were men. And for her to say that, it was kind of disheartening to hear, but it also reminded me of how important it is to make spaces where other people can feel welcome and feel like they can work it out and figure their way through. Because I didn't have that. I didn't get that, at least not within my department. And that kind of jump-started my deliberate efforts to make sure that my career, whatever it turned into, was going to be about treating people well and figuring out how you help people bridge their gaps instead of saying, nope, you're not going to make it. You can't get through it. This is not for you. There have been, time and time again, it's been demonstrated that people who don't get good grades on standardized tests can be some of the smartest people, and that people who get some of the best grades on standardized tests are the worst people. And I really don't want to be known in either one of those camps per se, but there's some middle ground. I was in the middle. My grades were reasonable. I like people well enough. I should be able to not fall all the way to the left and being rude, or all the way to the right and being disconnected. And then after those 2 things, the other big thing was having my first kid. Ooh. And I had her while I was in graduate school, but she brought this amazing balance into my life. And I used to be a workaholic, so I could work from, very first thing in the morning, and it could be the last thing that I did before I went to bed. But as a researcher, as an academic, and I kind of knew I wanted to be a professor at the time, I knew. So one of the ways that academic spaces work, especially for women, is you don't really get to have kids if you are planning to go up for tenure. Like, there's this language in the background that basically says, if you're going to have kids, you need to get tenure first. But graduate school is 5 years, and then working for tenure is another 7 years. And then you could end up deciding you don't want to have kids at that point, and you wish you would have, or you can't have kids. And I wasn't interested in going through that particular experience. So I decided to have my first kid, when I was in my master's program. And that was the best thing I ever could have done, because she reminded me that there's more to life than work. And that really forged my spirit. There's always been more to life than work. And how I'm going to end this set of thoughts is, from the time I left high school and really was in college, I was more concerned about how I would be remembered when I died than I was about how many hours I would work, or how many jobs I could hold, or how high of a title I could get. That wasn't my priority. If I was a jerk the whole way through, it wasn't worth it. And
so wait, so let's make sure I heard that right. Now it's about how you will be remembered, how will you be remembered when you die? Did I hear that right?
How I will be remembered when I die.
Oh, we'll get into that. Don't worry.
And it was kind of grim. I remember people would look at me kind of funny, like, why are you thinking that way? And I'm thinking, so for an example, we used to have a lot of homework, but homework counts for 25% of your grade. Mm-hmm. And homework assignment might have 15 questions. And I have classmates who would stick with these homework problems, a single problem, for 3 hours. And I had my infant at home. I wasn't doing this for 3 hours. And did it change my grade? Perhaps half a percentage point. But yeah, she'd be more aggravated if I came home 3 hours later than if I just let the half a point go.
Okay. Well, I guess before we kind of move on into maybe some of the other topics, like what is there anything else that you find me actually? Let me rephrase this. So we saw a negative influence, right? Like, I mean, I think a lot of people have that, right? Like I've had a lot of those too. Oh, you can't finish this, or you can't do that.
Right.
Who were the positive influences, and how did they shape you?
My number one positive influence was my mom. And she passed this past May, in May 2020, and that sucked. I know that might not be the prime word that you would expect to hear from me, but she was actually, before I went to Australia, on January 2nd, she got really, really ill. I took her to the hospital and we found out she had stage 4 cancer. And then she was gone in May. And I wasn't prepared for that in any way, shape, or form. But my mom was an educator, and she taught chemistry in Durham. And she was always motivated to uplift other people to figure out their path. So she was an instructional coach for one of the high schools in Durham. And she's been teaching since 1984. So she was getting to the point where she could retire. Mm-hmm. And she would always say, no matter what you're doing, do it the best that you can, and never forget to treat other people right. So my most positive influence was my mom, because no matter what it was, yeah, it could be hard. And yes, it might take longer, but that didn't mean that you couldn't do it. It just meant that you might have to figure out how to do it differently. And for that, there's no way to replace that. And I'll tell you, she's also been instrumental in helping people see the positive aspects of things when they are just downright ugly. And she did that for my kids day in and day out. Did it for my husband, did it for me, did it for her siblings. She was just my glowing star.
That's awesome. Yeah. And I mean, at the end of the day, life is not always fair, unfortunately, but it's what you do with it, right? It's those choices that you make, and how you, I guess, in some ways, take responsibility in regards to that. So, okay, so I think we have a pretty good roundabout base for who you are. Unless there's something else you really want to add, and if that's the case, let's add it right now, and then we'll start heading into where it gets a little hotter.
The only thing I'll add is I feel like I'm a rock star now. Thank you.
There you go. Right, that's the way it is. So let's go ahead and get into the forge. So you've laid out who you are at this moment in time, and I guarantee if you have this conversation tomorrow, it'd be different. And
Yep.
that's not the point. It is right here, right now, and that's awesome. So we've come into the forge. We have our on one hand procedures for how we make ourselves,
Right.
and on the other hand we have our materials. Okay. And for everybody, the new thing is procedures, because Captain Dadpool in our previous episode had a great story about a procedural error that occurred there. I would invite you guys to check that out. So let's first start off with materials. And I guess, what do you think some of those are right now? Like what do you think comes together to make the best you both actually did and what you'd like?
So I think about this in terms of experiences that made me, but then also the characteristics that I've had to grow into to be me. And the characteristics are patience and respect and humility, and perhaps to the biggest degree, empathy. But when it comes to experiences, number one is kids. Some small people, they'll change your whole life. And I know many people to believe that the kids would fit into your life, only to find out that they rearrange your life. And I've loved it. I love it even more now, perhaps after the last several months. But there's this desire to jump into things with excitement and less fear that's unfolded for me. And part of it comes from watching small people just say, all right, let's try this out. Let's see what we get. And then part of it is from seeing, admittedly, part of it is from seeing other people admit so much regret about what they haven't done, what they thought they could do later.
Okay.
There's, it's an interesting balance of patience and respect. And I started with those because in order to get to this point that I'm at in my career, I had to be really patient, and I had to respect some of the most disrespectful people that I've ever encountered. But to be me, I had to watch and see what I loved about others' personalities and their actions and merge it together with what I knew I was good at and what I knew I could handle day in and day out.
I had to write that down, and I kind of paraphrased something there, and let me know if it's off. But it's like seeing the love, or like seeing those things about other people that make you love them, or help you love them. I think it's really interesting. That's definitely something that we'll have to kind of talk about a little bit. So you kind of start pulling these things together. How hard is it to pull them all together?
It was now it's easier. So in full transparency, losing my mom was the most clarifying issue I've ever faced. And what I didn't say is I lost my mom on May 2nd. I lost one of my best friends on May 4th. And I've had maybe 6 other family members or close friends or mentors to die in this last year. To know so many people, a couple of them, it wasn't COVID related. The 3 of them, it wasn't COVID related. So chances are, even without COVID, I'd have lost all 3 of these people in this past year. And that, to me, it emphasizes why I had to look for the rainbows in the middle of the clouds. So you asked how I've been able to pull these together and if it was difficult. It was incredibly difficult. And I didn't have a choice in any of them. Like that, I didn't do anything to cause it, and there's nothing I could do to stop it for any of them. There's nothing I could do except EXCEPT, accept ACCEPT it. And that was a forced lesson in patience, a forced lesson in respecting life. And it really made me think about why I do what I do every day. It suddenly didn't make any sense to just go to work and spend all day or all my hours working for other people and not paying attention to my own kids. It doesn't make sense to me to work 80 hours a week for anything anymore when the people who you love so much can die the next day, or you just don't see them again. And there's no, the use of time forced my patience and respect to come together. And it hurt, but I'm clear about it now.
It's almost like it's underlying. I mean, when we talk the hammer, right? There's like this sense of like urgency in making these things now.
Yep.
Is that appropriate?
Yes. Because at this point, to not have them is short-sighted, and it wouldn't be my choice use of my life. It's not my choice use of my time. That's not, it's not okay anymore to just keep pushing things off thinking they'll be there later. Because I'm clear right now, it doesn't have to be. I mean, not that I want to make this all about my mom, but January 1st was a normal day. And then January 2nd was not a normal day. We went from, we had just gone on the summer before, July of 2019. We decided to drive up to Niagara Falls and drive down the East Coast. And I pushed my mom to take that vacation because she could have worked. And I was like, Mommy, no, we don't need to work. We need to go enjoy each other. And in retrospect, we could have never taken that trip on January 2nd. And I mean, we literally couldn't do anything. The whole country couldn't do anything by the middle of March. So everything got really, really clear after it was really, really blurry, that you can't just assume everything will be fine later.
So if you don't mind me asking now, I think there's kind of two threads we can kind of go on that I think are relating to this here, and they're kind of, you can probably say they're procedural in some ways, yes. Right? But like there's things that you had to change in order to subordinate yourself to those higher, like a higher purpose, like those higher things.
Yes.
Right. And what were like if you wouldn't mind, like maybe elaborating on some of those things, like what were some of those things that you had to procedurally change in order to get the right result, or at least what you think is the right result, because there's no guarantee, right?
Number one, I had to, and this was not an option. I had to reprioritize. So it used to be the case that serving others was one of my number one things to do. And I would, my kids would go with me to work meetings. My kids would go with me to community sessions. My kids did data collection with me. They were on site where I was if I was running a project that would allow me to be stationary. Mm-hmm. Because at that time, it was important to me to serve where I was serving. Mm-hmm. However, I now see that, or my view now is, just seeing them is good enough. Just seeing them in itself can be the task. So this reprioritization was letting things that excite my heart be number one and not letting external stuff be number one or other people be number one in terms of ranking of things I do from day to day. I would say the other big changes were about deciding what I wanted out of my efforts. So in my work life, when I think about what I would normally want, you want to get promoted, right? You want to get to the next level. You want to achieve some high ranking something. You want to make more money.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted all those things, but I've now gotten to the point where I'm like, for what? Why exactly do I want more of those things? And my motivation for a title is not there anymore. Motivation just to move up in the ranks because that's what you're supposed to do as an academic, that's gone. I do not have that as a shining priority to just be higher ranked because I can. It's more important to me now to have quality work that takes whatever time it takes and deciding what kind of title matters to me. So as you said when you introduced me, and as I've kind of said before, I care now. I've always cared about equity. Previously, it's been through health equity and making sure people have voices in places that they might not have had an opportunity to talk before. But now I'm thinking, you know what? I don't have to do that in the academic space alone. I can find ways to serve in community spaces. I can find ways to serve in corporate spaces, in non-traditional spaces. And it doesn't come with a title. It doesn't mean it comes with some corporate label. I can just do that work and be happy with it. And that's not the same person that I was even a few years ago.
Yeah, that's pretty, like, it's impressive because like that's kind of what we're trying to do here at some level. Like we're trying to say, hey, like let's lay out all these things that we think are important, and then maybe like because we have like the surface, right? But what's here's this over here, and this is right here, and this is right here. What's those underlying type of things, right? What's the substance of all that?
That's right.
And I find it interesting that like a lot of people think, being connected and serving others is a source of meaning, and it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's just interesting that the way you're prioritizing this is it's almost, I'm not getting a vibe right now, and this is, let me know if I'm off. I'm not getting a vibe that you are saying hard stop to serving other, like I'm just gonna go off and serve everybody or something like that. Like hard stop in regards to I prioritize myself, my family, those around me, and then like there's like a like this hierarchy of priorities.
Yes,
mm-hmm.
That's right.
And they all are trying to be subservient to the overarching thing, which is meaning in your life.
Yep.
Okay.
It became very obvious very quickly after this past year that doing the same old thing was not, it didn't have the same value. And I think I started to define value in a different way. It didn't have the same utility, the same value. None of that was the same as before.
Okay. And you said it, you define value differently. So I have to ask, how do you define value?
It's more intrinsic now.
Mm-hmm.
So put it bluntly, I do not care how much other people make. I do not care how high their titles go. Mm-hmm. What I have come to value more so now is more of a lateral, flat, or team situation. Yeah. I value having a workplace that I want to be in. I value having company, other people around me who I don't want to just tolerate other people. I don't want to spend my life just accepting stuff, but instead I'm valuing what we do to make it almost sounds cliche. I guess it gets to having a better space for our kids and all that, but it's more so about not destructing social fabric, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Like, can we just not be rude to each other? Can we just like appreciate that we are people
Yeah.
working around other people? It's not even complicated. It's really just,
Mm-hmm.
you know, maybe we could be nice just because.
Just
You know,
sit there and find the love in other people, or find the things that make them come out a lot.
right.
So it's really cool. Um, okay, let me see here. I don't think I've asked this question, and I don't know if I've alluded to it at all. So let's talk about some of the bad materials, I guess,
Mhm.
and I think I already know where you would go with this, because the bad materials are almost the wrong value.
Yep.
What was probably some wrong, instead of looking at it from that way, like what was maybe some wrong character traits that you kind of had to work out a little bit, like that just kind of had to say, hey, I'm sorry, you got to go away.
Um, I would say the biggest one is not being able to tolerate people who are still figuring out their growth process, still
Ooh.
figuring how to move to that next. Um, mm, I don't do well with people who are stuck. That's probably how I'd frame it. I'm not doing well with people who are stuck when I'd not been doing well with people who were stuck and had no interest in getting unstuck. So when you say you care about working with people and helping people and moving into a new space, it requires some tolerance when I mean, it can be for a whole host of reasons. It can be because they don't see the value in the work, or they don't see how things could be better, or they don't see what this contributes to, their lives or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe selfishness is probably what it comes to. I don't tolerate that in other people well, and I'm not willing to accept that it must be that way. So that leads to a good deal of discrepancies in perspective, is how I'll put it. But it's the skill I've had to work the hardest on.
Okay.
And, unfortunately, you learn how to do some of these. I've learned how to tolerate it better. And some would say I've learned to tolerate it too much.
I
So,
mean, it's a compensation act at some level, right? Like it's like
right.
it's not something that goes away, and it's rough. And you had a conversation with someone, Sean Cox, who is premiere his interview will premiere 3/17. So by the time yours it'll already be up. Because he's a Christian, and we were talking about the concept of sin. Like, and I asked the question, like, how do you compensate for it? Because at some level, I mean, you have to compensate because you already know that you're going to screw up at some level. I mean, nothing wrong in a lot of ways with that, but how do you compensate for it? Mm-hmm. So, but I like that. And I think that's going to really transition us into the sword. So let's go and transition into the sword. And we're back. All right. So far we've talked about your life. We've talked about being who you are, kind of your background, that you're a Carolina fan, but I can forgive you. It's okay. I'm really stuck on that right now. And the worst part of all this, guys, is I went to East Carolina Pirates, and I guarantee you, she doesn't even consider us a rival. You know why? Because we don't really compete that way. Like, especially from a basketball perspective, doesn't matter. Football, maybe back in a few years ago, I mean, several years ago, when before Scotty Moe, and yes, I don't like Scotty Moe, but that's pretty much that. So let's talk about the sword for a minute. The sword I've kind of equated in a lot of different ways, and there's a few things I think we can kind of glean from this, and I do want to spend just a brief time kind of re-outlining this just kind of quickly, because there's some things you talked about that I think we should hit on. One of those is empathy. The sword, empathetic. That doesn't make any sense. We'll definitely dive in on that one. Judgment, and then on top of that, it's this idea of being empowered and confident, right, in who you are and what you're capable of. Because back in the good old days, not good old days, it was probably barbaric because it was France in the late 1700s. So the French, there are two types of people: the nobles of the robe and the nobles of the sword. The nobles of the sword were classified as your aristocrats, right? They carried the sword around, stuff like that. It was seen as a sense of nobility, but we could still carry that meaning forward of being noble, but not being an aristocrat, right? And kind of understanding how and when we use the sword, how and when we choose to use it. You're able to through your journey so far, you're able to see into other people.
Well, to see into other people, I think the way that was evident is who I connected with. It was about who I connected with. And there have been times when I've connected with people who've had ulterior motives, just like everybody else. But when I think about my experiences with others, I most easily connected with other people who had compassion for others and who realized that they can't just say anything. They can't just do anything. They can't just act however their feelings drive them to act. They weren't just about themselves. They had a purpose. They had an intention that was beyond their own personal success.
It's almost like they have their own sword.
Right. I always do well with people who are like, this is what I like. This is what I do. This is how I do it. I'm willing to adjust, when I get in different spaces, but nevertheless, this is my goal. Those are the partners that I've had that I do absolutely 100% the best with.
Okay.
And not everybody has morals that allow them to operate that way. Put bluntly. Or actually, that's still kind of vague. Everybody doesn't have a character that lets them go after the noble thing while still having some integrity about themselves at home. Because some people, I'll say it like this, some people look great when they're out in public and they do great things and they want to hold up their titles and say, I am so wonderful because I serve in this way. How dare you not respect me? I don't do well with those folks.
It's like they're flaunting it.
Yes.
But then you realize when they flaunt it, they pull it out and you go, there's a stain right here, bud.
Yes.
There. It looks like you got a little rust.
Yes. Like, I'll use my sword to dig it out of your chest. Like that's I've seen a fair amount of that, more than I can. I realized I had to see it in order to know, or in order to recognize what to steer away from. Okay,
fair. That is I'm picking up what you're putting down, and I hope everybody else is. So that being said, right, like you're able to kind of, because you're carrying your sword and like it's a magical sword because it is what it is. It's your sword, and other people can see it. They gravitate towards it. it's kind of like you're wielding your meaning in life, like you're wielding
Yeah.
your why, you're wielding whatever the highest aim or value you have.
Right.
And so I find that interesting, and then you got to give me a minute here because there's something I'm trying to circle back to because it was important. It deals with this. It deals with that one quality that you're always working on. That one thing you're kind of trying to do, and that tolerance for others. How do you prevent you stabbing the sword into other people?
This is it's actually part of my work. It's what I think about on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm.
I ask myself, why are they doing what they're doing? And I try to appreciate that the reasons they do what they're doing is because it's a protective action. Chances are when people are doing mean things or doing things that are inappropriate, it's out of protection. It's out of fear. And, you know, it turns out to be true a good 95% of the time. Yeah. People are doing mean things because they want to be mean. They're doing them because they're trying to protect something about themselves, or they're trying to protect what they know, what they understand to be right or important or valuable. Mm-hmm. To me, that's the definition of empathy, is you respect what other people are going through, even when you don't understand it, even when it's not for you to understand. And I champion that when I talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. The point is, I don't have to know your problems, your story, your life to step back and mind my business enough to let you figure it out. So when I've been developing my skills to operate in this world, it's recognizing that people are usually acting out of self-preservation. They're afraid of losing something. They might not know why, but I don't need to ask why. What I have to do is create space for them to figure it out and not tear them down in the middle of it. But at the same time, you know, trying to keep that pendulum from swinging too far the other way, I had to set boundaries around people with that behavior and say, you know what? You can do that to yourself, but I can't let you do it to me, and I can't let you do it to others, especially if it's not with, sometimes things have to get ruffled. I get it. Feathers have to get ruffled for, you know, jobs to get done, for goals to get reached that serve the greater good. But if that's not the case, and even when it is the case, that needs to be super clear from the beginning. But you can't just hurt other people just because, and I have to be able to put boundaries on it, but also respect that process that somebody else is going through. It's not fun. It's not easy. It's not pleasant to experience, but it is necessary for growing up.
So there's a few things I want to dial in on. So I think it's interesting. Like you said, like most people are doing these things because it's out of protection. They don't understand something. Trying to, I don't want to get too much away, right? Or what I think is too much away. So I guess let's frame it this way. If we've already established that using the sword to stab somebody is the wrong way to do it, how do we use it?
I think of using my sword to draw a circle around them while they figure out their stuff.
A circle around them? Do you say a circle around them to figure out their stuff?
So I think of having a sword and standing in the dirt. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to poke you with my sword, but I'm going to give you a nice, healthy boundary to understand what happens when your issue is affecting people outside of that space, outside of this safe space. Everybody needs a safe space to figure it out, but they can't just spew it onto others, especially when it's harmful or hurtful. They have to know that there are limitations. And because I'm in a public health world, we often see situations where there are unintended consequences from decisions that get made. That is public health. Public health is spending our time and spinning our wheels trying to remind people that there are implications for every decision that gets made. It's the same thing with people who have this self-preservation situation going on. Yes, they do need to do it. Yes, there's a purpose, a value, and a need. But when there are unintended consequences of it, part of my job with my sword is to say, wait, I'm not trying to tell you that you can't process this in the way that you see fit. But here's your circle for you. And here's this larger circle for the people who get affected. You need to be mindful of what's happening outside of your immediate circle and act accordingly. And if you can't act accordingly, that's when we have equity issues. That's when we have inclusion issues, because that means you're not thinking of anybody but yourself. And that's why I call that selfishness.
I like it. And I'm going to kind of start to allude to something that I would just like to sit here and and maybe kind of talk about a little bit. So, are you a Lord of the Rings fan, or heard of Lord of the Rings? Watch Lord of the Rings? I
tried to watch it.
Too long.
I didn't rated for any of them.
That's fair. That's fair. So Tolkien, in a lot of ways is his own little mastermind in some regards. I mean, there are a lot of great fiction writers out there who are masterminds in their own right. One of the scenes in Peter Jackson's adaptation of The Two Towers in particular, right, is this idea, or it's kind of like, so King Theoden he's corrupted, right? He's corrupted by Saruman. And Saruman has corrupted his spirit. He's made him weak and frail, pretty much like overprotective, doesn't care about anybody else but himself. And he just kind of he's literally like decaying. When Gandalf the White comes back, like he kind of walks into the halls of Edoras with some trickery, of course, good old Gandalf. And well, he expels Saruman, one, and then two, the only way King Theoden, like you can interpret this in any number of ways, and maybe I'm overreading it, but I want to, for my purposes, it's really easy. Gandalf says something like, "You will know your own strength when you pick up your sword." And because swords, the thing in Tolkien's universe is swords have a lot of weight and meaning behind them. They have stories and lives. So like it's very Celtic and Norse like mythology type thing. And so he picked up his sword, he pulled it out, and when he pulled it out, it's like he realized what he was capable of, and he woke up. So I guess I'll ask this question: can you give your sword away to someone else to empower them?
Every day.
Sweet.
Every day. I love, first of all, I have an awesome team that I've been working with for the last several years. And the reason I love this team is not because they know so much more than I do, or that I know so much more than they do, but that we're willing to share what we know with each other for use across spaces. Now, we all need and we all seek different types of training. We all go out and get information and bring it back. We all go get new details, new strategies, new approaches, and bring it back. But in some circles, everybody will go get it and keep it a secret and say, you must come to me in order to figure out how to use it. And our team was excellent at saying instead, well, wait, I can share this with you. I'll show you how we did it. But if you need help along the way, when you try to figure it out, I got you. I'll have your back. I can support you through it. And no, I won't hold it over your head that you don't know exactly how to do it just right. That is, to me, what sharing your sword looks like. Yes, sometimes I need other people's, and sometimes they need mine. And we go together so that we can get it done. But at the end of the day, yeah, I want you to have some of the power that I have. I want you to have some too. I don't need to hold it all. It doesn't work. That's not how power works. It's not as though there's just a certain amount of it and then it all goes away. There's, in my opinion, there's plenty of space where we could use our shared efforts to make things better, bigger, stronger, more durable, more sustainable. And it works in health, but it also works in these other spaces where we fight each other and we act like we can't share. I mean, I suppose I'll leave it with that, but I like sharing a lot more than I like fighting.
All right. So we'll go ahead now. I think that's a perfect point, like right there, right? Because like there's that, and for me, just kind of close up on the sword really fast. Like when I get this darn symbol right one of these days, right? So I'm looking for animators, people who can actually do this thing right. One of the things that I want is the sword, and you can see is clearly sheathed. It's not drawn. What, like that right there to me, I think is the use of a sword. Yes, you have it, and God knows if you have to use it, you have to use it. But if you're using it maybe on yourself.
Yep.
Right? Because you got to cut something out that doesn't belong. Or you gotta, I don't know. It's not always helpful. Or it's maybe an understanding of yourself. Or it is you're cutting the chains off someone else, and maybe even empowering them by giving your sword away. Almost the same substance, and I say that because they're on the same level. They're on the same level. The sword and the pen are at the same. You said that there was a break originally, like there was a certain way you were thinking, and now there's another way you were thinking because of your recent experiences. So let me rephrase the question. If somebody was to write your book 20 years after your death, 100 years, doesn't matter. So much that maybe 2,000 years down the road and Dr. Vicki's legend remains. What do they want? What should they be writing about? How should you be remembered?
I should be remembered as a pusher for everybody to have their best life. And it doesn't mean, it's not restricted to health. It's not restricted to the job. It's not restricted to the people who had degrees. It is not restricted to the people who made it to a high-ranking title. It's not restricted to the place or the people who had a bunch of money or the highest paying this or the people who could travel the most or any of that. It's not about that. At the end of my life, I would want somebody to say she was always trying to make sure that people were able to grow into what they wanted to be. And yeah, they'll have barriers, but she was doing her damnedest to make sure those barriers weren't based in judgment. Yeah.
Okay.
Removing judgment while people figure themselves out.
Removing judgment while people figure themselves out. It's slightly poetic thinking about your life a little, like thinking about what you shared with me today and shared with everybody today. Because it's also what you're weak in. If you think about it, right? It's like well, no judgment while they figure out themselves, and that's the weakness part.
Yep. They say your biggest strength is also your biggest weakness.
Same sides of the same coin, or two different sides of the same coin.
That's right.
Right. So, I guess what I would say is, what are you working on to kind of, subject yourselves to that objective?
So this is actually what is putting me on this precipice of deciding how to operate in the academic space and then how to operate outside of it. Okay. So I tend to think of how my personal experiences, how my stuff outside of work drives me to think about the value of my day-to-day work. And So I didn't say this, and I'm realizing I've gone through this whole situation and didn't actually express that I spent my time from 2014 to just last year working with people managing the Flint water crisis. So I didn't say that at all. And I'm realizing that is part of the underlying reason that saying this so simply is my motivation.
Perfect.
The Flint water crisis. So I've been in Flint since 2013. And when I first got to Flint, I was motivated to simply address ways that everybody could have great health. And even less optimistically, how everybody could not suffer as much when they have health problems. That's where I started. And I realized, okay, there's an access to health issue. There's a situation when it comes to people being treated well when they go to the doctor. There's even some ignorance when it comes to understanding that people who have multiple chronic conditions have to carry multiple loads around every day. It's not just, there is not an additive problem. So having one more disease doesn't just add on a little bit of a burden. It adds on a whole new weight because you have to figure out how to deal with that disease plus the first one that you had in the first place. An example, if you have heart disease and you have diabetes, you might think, especially if you had heart disease first, you're like, okay, I changed my diet and I'll exercise a bit more and I'll be okay. Well, then you develop diabetes, and let's say you have to take diabetes medicine. Well, what if that medicine makes you dizzy? You're not as likely now to go out and walk on your own if you're concerned that you might pass out because you're dizzy. So now your life just got a whole lot more complicated, and it's not just adding on another disease and another medicine, but it's complicating the first problem. And I'm starting with that because that is the health landscape in Flint before the water crisis. And then you have this whole water situation happen. You don't trust your government. You don't trust the people who run your larger forms of government. You don't trust the institutions. You don't see the institutions in your city standing up to fight for the right thing. Everybody's after money. What do you do as a resident in that community? Now, you struggle and you're wondering why nobody is trying to help. And other people are, but you can't see it. And it makes you upset. It makes you angry. It makes you not trust. It makes you frustrated. It creates all of these new emotions that then settle in and turn into barriers to just living regular life. So I'm sitting here thinking of empathy, thinking of people's value as individuals from the perspective that in Flint, many residents have been undervalued. Their lives almost didn't count. Their existence almost didn't matter until somebody went to another state and said, hey, we count, we matter, we count. And that is disheartening. So jump forward to today. You asked me what I'm doing to figure myself out now, to make sure I'm moving forward. I'm standing on the experience I've had in Flint trying to support community members who wanted to have a better health situation, who wanted to be heard when they were being ignored, who thought that they belonged in conversations when people in power didn't think they did. I am looking at ways that I can support that mission in formal workplaces, in government spaces, nonprofit places, community organizations, and then of course, traditional corporate spaces where power speaks more than anything else. I'm turning my attention to not just champion for health, but for people to have a chance to figure out how to get healthier, learning the process of how to do it, how managers, how people in power can do a better job of supporting other people in that process. Like you said, and like I've said, my biggest strength is my biggest weakness. I'm trying to figure out ways to commit to helping and standing with others while they figure themselves out. That's the same thing that supervisors and managers have to do. It's the same thing that people in elected positions or in high appointment roles have to do. It's really just part of life at this point. Standing with others while they figure themselves out and maybe not canceling them out just because they didn't do it right or perfectly the first time.
Yeah. Well, I guess what I'd like to kind of dial in on with dealing with this is like, so you've written 42 publications and multiple studies, and they range from topics like the Flint water crisis to any number of topics dealing with the diversity and inclusion and equity, all that fun stuff. Helped you, like, how has writing those publications helped you set the conditions for moving forward for yourself and others?
Well, so this is an interesting question, and I'll tell you from the from the way that I was trained, fewer words are better than more words. And just because you can say more, it doesn't mean you should. Now, I tend to like this principle in writing. And the reason I like it so much is because your meaning can get swamped in the use of bigger, longer, more I can't even say the word.
Words with more syllables in them.
That's it. When you say more, it doesn't mean people get more. And when you write more, it doesn't mean that they take away more. Now, this it's interesting because in the academic space, a lot of people like to write and say a lot of words. And I'm not a champion for that per se.
Mm-hmm.
But when you get into talking about experiences, interpersonal experiences, it does require more context. It does require more expression. And that's probably what I've taken away from writing more so than anything else. Mm-hmm. Some of the topics that I want to address, they haven't been written on in the world of public health. And I've started and stopped and started and stopped and started and stopped writing them, getting stuck because the context is everything for figuring out how to go forward from here. As a methods person, a numbers person, you tell the story, you put the number, or you put the numbers in a chart, you present it, you say what the numbers say, and you walk away. But when you're talking about how people are figuring themselves out, there's an entire backstory that you have to set up. Do
you see why I ask about your story first?
Just a tad. I picked up on it a little bit. But that's it. That's exactly what I'm finding. So writing, yes, I've written a number of articles, and I've done it out. What I would say about my articles is every single one of those was a team effort. Every single one. And the value in the team thought made me much more encouraged and motivated to write. Nothing about individual writing does it for me. I don't enjoy it. I don't even think the perspectives are sound when it's just mine. But in general, writing helps me share with other people how complicated a situation can be, but how common the solutions are to problems that have complicated backgrounds.
Have I hit you in the feels yet at all?
Huh?
Have I hit you in the feels yet?
A little bit. I'm sitting here thinking as you're asking these questions, I'm motivated to do some of these things, but as you're talking, as you're asking me questions, I'm realized I'm motivated even more so by the team structure with which I like to do things and the group perspective that makes what we're doing. It ensures that there is utility in the stuff that we're doing. And it's not just, one more set of thoughts going out in space and hoping somebody gets it.
Well, I think it's funny that you said something that I thought was really interesting. So as a pen, right? More words, right? So how about I just use the sword and just switch it around some more times?
Oh, that's dangerous.
You know what I'm saying? It's the same. Granted, yes, they're different, but they almost have the same structure. They're made out of like the same substance. It's almost like we decided to just separate them because they look and act differently, or they look differently but act the same. A sword can just as easily kill someone as a pen can, or a pen can kill someone just as easily as a sword can through your writing. You could destroy someone's entire being by doing that, or you can lift them, or you can communicate the problem clearly so that way more people can come to an understanding and grasp it, or you can convolute it to equivocate it versus, piercing through it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's really interesting in a lot of ways. And then I lost my train of thought, so I have to regain it. I don't think I need to ask that question anymore. Okay, so I think we kind of hit on a lot of things for the pen. I'm going to leave it open for if you want to add anything in regards to that. I think we kind of touched on it very nicely with talking about different things.
I struggle. Admittedly, I struggle with writing because as an aside, one of the things that I'm mindful of is that in our histories, in the histories of our world, storytelling is really important, but writing has not always been the way that we do it. So when I think of a pen, I'm not thinking of just the words that have to get written, but also thinking about the illustrations that could tell it just as well if we were willing and open to receiving messages beyond, not beyond, but in addition to word form.
Or more abstract use of words.
Yes.
Like poetry, art, and typically speaking. Okay.
Yeah,
I like that, actually. I never see. That's what I love about some of these conversations too, because so Dadpool talked about procedural errors in forging, and Oz saw the next thing we'll get into as like achievement as well. And you're saying like, well, what about drawing? Like, what about art? And I'm just going, oh my. So that's awesome. Thank you. So hopefully I didn't derail you. Sorry.
No.
Sorry if I did.
That's it.
Okay, cool. So we'll go into the last topic, which is the crown. All right. So gone through your life. We talked about the hammer. We talked about the sword. We talked about the sword and the pen and the relationship in between. We talked about the pen, and now we're going to talk about the crown. And the crown, in many ways, is self-leadership. It's the burden of taking on that responsibility. It's burden. It's excitement. It's everything. It's the requirements that you as a fully realized individual, you have to take up, and you have to become this. You have to subject yourself to it. Self-discipline as well. It's also achievement in what you achieve, but don't get too bogged down in the temporary things. So I guess let's talk on self-leadership first. What have been some of your struggles and your successes?
Deciding what I wanted to be when I grew up was probably it wasn't an issue and it wasn't a problem, but it was situation number one. And I'm saying that because when I was little, I thought I wanted to be a heart surgeon. The reason I wanted to be a heart surgeon is because I knew that many older adults were beginning to die from heart disease. And I was worried that the issues facing older adults were going to become more common for younger adults because it was related to lifestyle. Everybody's lifestyle was changing. We went from a very active people to a very sedentary people. We spent a whole lot more time sitting down. So when I was little, I wanted to be a heart surgeon. But the very first way that this arose for me was when I realized I don't want to do that. I'm good at math, but I'm steadily trying to reach this other goal because it's what other people see as valuable. And that was probably my first decision to really think about what I wanted to do and how I wanted to lead and how I wanted to take responsibility for myself and what my future would hold. So I decided to go into a quantitative space. And as I've already shared at the very beginning, that was isolating, and it was not a space that was occupied by people who looked like me or sound like me or had any shared experiences with me.
Mhm.
And that was sad. However, I knew myself well enough to know what I was good at. I knew what I was willing to fight for. I knew what I was willing to work through. And I knew math is just a bunch of numbers. Those numbers don't do magical things. They are reliable, they are consistent, they are predictable, they are solid over time. And I use that as a way to anchor myself in my capacity and say, you know what, if I'm going to be something going forward, it has to be something that I'm good at. It has to be something based on what I understand. It has to be something that I'm okay with. And I don't really care what other people think about it. And I don't really care if y'all are all right with it, but I can find a way to be this and be this for me because this is what I want.
That's the way it works right there. That's good. It's good.
That was it. That was.
I guess I would like to explore something here, if you don't mind. Numbers. So I have a full bookshelf of Young behind me. I don't know if you can tell or not. Partly because I'm hiding, but I have a full bookshelf of Young, and a lot of other people. And one of the things about numbers is sometimes it feels it's funny because it's like the opposite. It's kind of like the opposite. Like numbers are cold, heartless, and just there, right? Versus that sense of connectedness with other people, that sense of vibing with other people. I guess how do you overcome that? How did you use that in your tool belt or that aspect of who you are to connect with people?
I think numbers aligned with the conversation from today. People use numbers as data, and they use data to make decisions. People use that data to make decisions, but usually those decisions can be used to divide people, or they can be used to bring people together. They can be used to create a better decision-making strategy. They can be used to figure out ways to be more successful as a whole, rather than just being broken down into smaller pieces that only help us individually. My bridge is I want data, I want information, I want unchanging, non-manipulated information to be used to help everybody go into a better space, not just me, and not to push others away, not to push others out of the spotlight, not to push others down, but for us all to get better. And when I think of numbers as being cold and heartless, that is the exact thing that makes me say, we're not doing it to hurt somebody else. It's not associated with a feeling. It is not associated with hurting you. It is not associated with a negative connotation. For that very reason, it can be used to bolster all of us, not undercut someone else. And
it's almost like you're using it wrong. It's the same concept with the sword. It's like, hey, like this is not being used right.
Yes. Like a sword it doesn't kill you by itself. Mm-hmm. It can also be used to build things. It can also be used to create new products, new resources, but it's all in how it gets contextualized. I think of numbers the same way.
I guess so kind of cut to the chase on this one. I guess how do you take on that responsibility?
That's been the hard part of becoming an adult.
I like it. That's the hard part of becoming an adult.
That's definitely the work, because we get, in school, I got trained to use data to make nothing matter. Mm-hmm. And my passions, my motivations for helping others pushes me to do exactly the opposite. Look at the data and understand where the nuance is so that you can make sure nobody falls behind. That's been my work of the last, 8 6 or 7 years, like the early years, were looking at data and being told by mentors and senior people, oh, what you're seeing is not real, it's fake. But inherently knowing in my heart that the data, you didn't understand the story because it wasn't a life that you lived. But I understand these data in a whole different context because I grew up seeing very different experiences. Mm-hmm. Ultimately, data are the information holders. It's just whether we think it's important enough to look at what they're really saying. And then if we write enough, we put our pen to paper enough to describe the context or the lens through which we should be viewing it.
Yeah. So I guess there's a question here. I don't know quite how to ask it because I'm trying to figure out how to word it. And there's some underlying themes here. So one is a patience to develop others, right? That's one component of this.
Right.
Another component is using relevant or is using data to come to decisions, right? In context or something like that, which I would almost want to push back on you a little bit and say that there's a relevancy factor there. Mm-hmm. A huge one, actually, that makes data interpretation very difficult. Mm-hmm. And then it's like, oh, I don't want to leave people behind either.
Right.
So, and I think this, in a way, is something that deals with an individual and forging individuals and in the meaning forge and trying to, because like, I don't want to say that just because you're an individual, you are now, no, it's not about you like all the time. Like, yes, you can be an individual and you can operate within society appropriately. Like it's down to the 1 to infinite number or something like that, because like you're able to navigate these things. Right. Maybe not perfectly, but at least somewhat.
Right.
And we talked about, kind of cordoning off people a little bit, a little quarantine. Be like, hey, you need to figure yourself out. Give yourself a sword a little bit. One of my things is I like to develop individuals where I find meaning and empowering that. Right. Mm-hmm. So the question I'm trying to kind of get around to is, how do I find those relevant things? Like I guess maybe it's maybe probably too broad because it's a difficult question to answer, or it's a really simple question. I just haven't figured out how to simply answer it. And I'm just trying to look at this and I'm trying to go, I look at a person and I guess, what does it mean for a leader to not leave someone behind? That's it.
When I think of what it means to be a leader, what it means to have impact, and then what it means to not dismiss others, that aligns with not leaving someone behind. So for example, when I think of data, you always have the minimum and there's always a maximum. So there's a range of things that are possible. But when you see a lot of that minimum happening, or you see a lot of the maximum happening, you got to start asking questions about what makes those groups so different. Mm-hmm. And to just say, oh, the range is small, or it's just this narrow and these two groups are pretty small, that's not okay. Because inevitably, when one group makes a stride in their direction, it's going to leave the other group going a different direction or leaving them standing where they are. So as a leader, it means listening to the people in your space. And when they bring something forward, we can't always address whatever it is in that moment, but it means not ignoring it or pretending that happening was not there. We cannot pretend that someone's experience is not real because everyone doesn't experience it. And we can't assume that everybody has the best of experiences just because those are the loudest, most vocal people. That's not life. We see time and again, that's not everyone's reality. You can't leave somebody behind because you don't agree or you don't understand. It means you have to take the time to understand and learn about it. It's, if you're going to be a leader, be one. And it means hearing all your folks, not just doing what you want because you want to.
And is it reasonable to say this as well, right? Because I think you can look at this from a business perspective often, is if you don't align to that, then you probably need to empower them. And I try and say this, like, it's not just go over there, go do something over there. No, it's more like, let me help you find the right thing.
Yes.
And not just completely forgetting them or something like that and like kicking them off to the curb. So like sometimes people don't always fit within an organization or a culture or a group. I mean, there's a lot of things that happen there. So
I definitely agree. And I think this is where, so I tend to be a strengths-based type person, strengths-based and solution-focused. Those tend to be my go-to ways of thinking and strategizing. If somebody doesn't fit into the mold that's already there, or they're not with the majority, it typically means they represent another audience. And that other audience can be an opportunity in itself to advance.
Yep.
There are more people, there's hardly ever just one person who thinks something. They might not vocalize it, but there's hardly ever just one.
Mm-hmm.
And it becomes an opportunity if you explore it. Now, if you dismiss it, it's a lost opportunity. But if you embrace it and figure out how to make it stand up, shine, and have some value, that the persons in that group can express and enjoy, everybody wins. And that's, I wish that was more true more often. And I think it's becoming to be the case in our, larger US culture, but it's
I mean, at the end of the day, I would say it's a struggle this is my personal take. I think it's a struggle. It's what's made this country great.
Mm-hmm.
We set off with a bold vision of what we think the right way a government should be, the right way a society should be. And we have struggled along the way. We have suffered along the way, trying to aim and trying to take responsibility at that higher goal. And I think that's really what makes this country so great in so many different ways. Now, I'm not going to say we haven't done the wrong things. Like, I'm not saying that at all.
Yeah.
Because we have. We're typically where there's progress can be construed in two different ways, either the good or the bad.
But there are so many different ways to reach the same goal.
Agreed.
And when I see that get embraced, like, things tend to go much, much better. If we acknowledge that there's more than one way to reach our intended outcomes, things are better for many people. I'm not saying it's easier, but I'm saying on the whole, I think it's better.
Okay. Well, let's just do a quick transition and we'll kind of go into closing and you'll get your final say. So it's been a privilege and an honor, Dr. Vicki, to have you on the show. Thank you for being a guinea pig so far in this, right? One of the first few people, top 10, but what? It's been a privilege and an honor to have this conversation with you. I think I've learned a lot, and then I think a lot of people are going to learn a lot from you.
Thank you so much, Jim. It's been awesome to just think about why we do what we do and how we do it.
Exactly, right? It's kind of, in a lot of ways, it's therapeutic. And in other ways, it's like, oh crap, I got to let the fire in me again and kind of get things done the way I need to get them done. I saw a lot of different things and a lot of different like motifs kind of in your story, and it's kind of in many ways like you're at the moment, right? Because life changes, right? It's almost like you're kind of aligning. You've aligned somewhat to the best of your ability in time and space, and that's really good.
Right.
Being an individual is not easy, but at the end of the day, I think we both agree we'd rather have a team of ones than a team of 1 and 0.
Yeah.
because no matter how many zeros you have, you'll never equal 1. But if you have 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 equals, right? Whatever number. So, I guess, what should people be looking at for you right now in the immediate future, or where can people kind of find you? I know you're moving back to North Carolina. I know you have a consultancy firm right now, and you're probably trying to go to UNC Chapel Hill. I'm sorry. Out loud. But what are you, like, I guess, where do you think you'll be here in the next year or so, and how can people find you?
Well, in this next year or so, what I really hope to be doing is finding ways to support different types of organizations, profit, nonprofit, corporate, academic. Basically, anytime you're working with people and you say that you want to positively impact their lives, I want to be a partner in that with you. So that means, how can I help you serve your staff, serve your clients, or generally think about the voices that you need in your boardrooms, in your spaces, in your conversations. I want to be that partner with you in identifying those voices and then getting them there. And of course, identifying the opportunity within. And if you're trying to find me, I'm on LinkedIn, Vicki Johnson Lawrence. That's one of the easiest ways. My website is resiliencywins.com.
Oh.
And yes, it's out there. It exists. Of course, you can contact me through Michigan State. I'll be there and I'll be around. I'm not running to go running away from anything, I should say. So I'll be around. And in terms of what I want you to know and what I want you to remember.
Oh, hang on now. Like, is this the final words of wisdom thing, or is this
not the total words of wisdom?
Okay.
But
all right.
When you think about me and this next year and what I've said today, just know that diversity counts. Don't forget that diversity counts. And there are people like me who are here to help you figure out why and how diversity matters for your life, your business, your work. So those aren't the final words.
Okay, just making sure.
Your words.
I know, like, sometimes the questions get a little dicey, and they get technical, and they all relate to one another at some level, but, I guess I just got to make sure. So, well, remember, if you found this content awesome, enjoyable, please like, comment, subscribe. It really helps the channel. It really helps me see what's going on. It also, it's going to help the channel grow. And not just grow on YouTube, but grow on other platforms. Right now, I'm just not on those yet, but bear with me. And, well, before I pass it off to her, just remember, life isn't always going to be easy. Meaningful, it's literally the life, like, it's your life. And being an individual in that is super important. Just understand that it's not going to be easy. And most of the time, a meaningful life isn't an easy one. Is not an easy one. So I want to pass it off to Dr. Vicki for her final words to say to whoever is watching this right now. And, well, I'm sure it's going to help it. I'm sure it's going to help you.
When I think of what we know as a community, as a society, and I think about how I can be most helpful, what I would love for you to hear from me is that work is not everything. School is not everything. There's no vocational activity that will define the rest of your life. It just isn't. But when you get old and you want people to remember what you've done, what you've brought, what you've built, what you've contributed to, don't let that be mired or only run by one aspect of your life. Remember, there's family, there's friends, there's the way that you contribute to your society being better. And for me, that's being empathy driven. And it means I want everybody's voices to be heard. I want to live in a space that is in a community that's full of love and perhaps everybody winning, not just a few. So as you go forward in your day-to-day work and your day-to-day life, Remember the actions that you take in and out of the workplace that can benefit yourself, but also benefit others and uplift the space that you live in. Think about the future for the people coming behind you and realize you can have a major impact. It doesn't have to be through a title. It doesn't have to be through a rank, but it can definitely come through your actions. I hope that works for you. I hope it helps you. And always feel free to reach out if I can be of help to you. Thanks.